In light of the new Delta Force game being announced, and honestly to how well the original game is received when it comes up in my videos, I want to do a recap on the franchise and especially look at Delta Force Black Hawk Down, which is a game I have and every now and then use to test retro builds. This video is not sponsored in any way, shape or form, just so you know. Now to start this off, I want to take a brief look at the new game that's set to be released in 2024. It's going to be called Delta Force Hawk Ops and it'll have 3 modes of games. The first one, Hazard Operations, will feature a 3-man squad, loot hunt, and reaching an extraction point, so apparently some kind of battle royale. The second game mode announced is Havoc Warfare. It'll feature class selection, vehicle warfare, and I was already guessing this was going to be a Battlefield-like experience, but the description then just spoils it by saying, experience the dynamic and realistic Battlefield. So yeah, I think this is going to emulate the Battlefield games. The third and last mode announced is the Black Hawk Down campaign, which is going to be a full remaster of the original Delta Force Black Hawk Down. I'm so glad they're doing this and not only throwing out their money-grabbing freemium games. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how that's going to play. I don't have very high hopes for this, especially considering Tencent, the company that bought the rights to Delta Force franchise, is known for PUBG, Clash of Clans, and other things that aren't really in my area of interest. In any case, being a nostalgia nerd that I am, pun intended, I think it's a good idea to take a look back at what the original game felt and looked like. I'm not going to talk a lot about the real-life Delta Force, but there might be some people out there that don't really know what it is, and for them I'll just say it's an elite part of the American military. It's a tier 1 unit. That means it's comprised of the best men that get recruited from different branches of the military. In most recent years, Delta Force was involved with the capturing of El Chapo, one of the world's most known drug lords, in Operation Black Swan. So, the Delta Force series of video games started in the year of our Lord 1998 with the release of Pure and Simple Delta Force by Novalogic. The game was only released for Windows and it used their own proprietary engine called Voxel Space, which in turn had its debut in 1996 with the renowned helicopter game Comanche. In 1999 came the following game in the series, Delta Force 2. Although it used the same engine as the OG game, it was revamped and got some new features like hardware acceleration and the ability to simulate tall grass. In the end of the year 2000 came the third game in the series, Delta Force Land Warrior. The game has 30 missions through multiple continents and it also featured incremental improvements in the engine, including hardware acceleration for polygonal buildings and other structures. In 2002, it received a standalone expansion pack called Delta Force Task Force Dagger. In 2002, there was yet another Delta Force released, subtitled Urban Warfare, and this one was the first console game of the series being released for the Sony PlayStation. Finally, in 2003, we have the release of Delta Force Black Hawk Down for Windows, Mac OS, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. Developers finally abandoned the Voxel Space engine for a version of the engine used in Comanche 4 that had support for multiple platforms. Black Hawk Down had an expansion released in 2004 called Team Sabre, and it added 2 new campaigns. In 2005, Novalogic released a partial remake of the first game in the form of Delta Force Xtreme for Windows. The game received mixed reviews, although it came out as a $20 budget video game. Graphics were too simplistic compared to what other games were doing at the time. Then we get to 2009 with Delta Force Xtreme 2, the last game of the original series we ever got. Unlike its predecessor, it was completely original. Unfortunately, the game wasn't well received, with complaints ranging from bad AI to poor physics and uninspiring missions. Back then, there was another Delta Force game announced, Delta Force Angel Falls, but Novalogic unfortunately closed its doors and the game got cancelled. So now that we took a trip across all Delta Force games, I want to focus on the game that out of them all seemed to me like it has the biggest fanbase, Delta Force Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down sold over 100,000 copies in the UK alone. The game is based on the book of the same name. It's a tragic story for the US and the people of Somalia, in which the country fell in civil war and had one of the militias take power. The UN, including the US, tried to intervene and obligate the militias to share power, but the militia in power saw the attempts as a threat and started to attack the foreign soldiers. This resulted in the US going after the leader of the militia, Mohammed Farah Adid, and engaging in battles that caused civilian casualties and made the population grow ever so distasteful of the operation. During one of the incursions against the militia in power, 3 American Black Hawk helicopters were taken down. There was a bloody battle to defend the forces inside 2 of the helicopters and subsequent missions to rescue the survivors. This came to be known as the Battle of Mogadishu, or the Black Hawk Down Incident, in the name of the book, game, and movie. The game was released for the Xbox and the PS2 as well as for the PC. If you were a PC gamer back then, you know that the PC version usually looked better than the console versions. Here's a comparison between the Xbox version and the PC version. The console captures were kindly sent by my friend Rick from the Rick's Random Retro YouTube channel. The requirements of the game are a Pentium 3 running at 733 MHz, and it recommends a P4 at 1.4 GHz plus 256 MB of RAM, and for the video card it just says 3D with 32 MB, being either a TNT2, a GeForce, or an ATI Radeon. The system I'm using to run the game is a Pentium 3 running at 1.133 GHz. It has a 12-latin CPU, which was fast for the time. This was a computer I built for my Voodoo 5, and I did try to run the game with the computer the way it was, but the game is from 2003, the Voodoo 5 being from 2000, and with no official driver updates after that, wasn't doing so great for this application. So I upgraded the video card to the much faster GeForce 4 Ti 4600. The game didn't run as well as I hoped it would, but by now I was committed to running the game with this PC. The experience was probably much closer to what I would have back in the day, instead of if I used some OP system with newer parts. The game is divided in missions, and there are always 3 missions available to pick from. The way I played it was choosing them chronologically, starting from the earliest and moving forward. There are about 15 missions in the game, and I did write a piece about every single one of them, but I think you'll get tired of listening to me, so I've tried to pick the high points. There are quite a few missions in which you have to use weapons that are mounted into vehicles, like this 50 cal on the Humvee or a minigun on the helicopter. There are also 50 cals mounted on tripods. On the beginning of each mission, the game lets you choose between a few different weapons to carry with you. So if you think a sniper rifle is better suited for a certain mission, the game might let you do that. There are also multiple ways in which you get inserted into war zones. You can start on a Humvee, you can come in by boat on a river, you might be dropped in by a helicopter, or even start on a military base and take a helicopter ride to the war zone. So very creative here with the different insertion methods. The base game that we're looking at today has a total of 15 missions, and they get increasingly difficult. The first 4 missions have different objectives, but honestly, they feel like different twists on raiding a village and shooting down a whole bunch of enemies. There are a couple of missions in which you have to deal with hostages, being careful not to shoot them while battling insurgents, and then escort them to safety. There's also one stealth mission, the only one out of the bunch. In this one, you have to use the night vision goggles. I kept switching them on and off. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of the game in the dark with the light from the fires around the village. The real plot of the game only starts on Mission Irene. It's the 11th mission of the game. This is actually one of the tiny beefs I had while playing throughout the whole thing. You have to play through 10 missions before you actually get into the Black Hawk Down incidents. In Mission Irene, you invade a village once again. This time you start at a military base and you go in by helicopter, which is a first in the game, starting on the military base. After shooting a couple of terrorists armed with RPGs from the helicopter, you land. Then you get some hostages that were held inside the building, and then you clear an area for the pickup of the hostages. In the end of the mission, you hear an audio saying that the first Black Hawk went down. Now, to tell you that this is where things get serious, the game goes into another cutscene at this point. Honestly, I think the cutscenes were well made and placed, and they really help you get into the mood of the grim situation. In the following mission, Lost Convoy, you go into the city by Humvee looking for the downed Black Hawk. Once you find it, you have to help defend the crash site so the soldiers can get extracted. Then we get to mission 13, The Last Stand. I took way too long to finish it because I had to do it way too many times. It's extremely challenging. In this one, you basically just walk around the shanty town and blow up some mortars in the end. But the area is extremely well guarded. In the Last Mile mission, the Mogadishu Mile, you escort by foot a convoy of armored vehicles with the rescued soldiers throughout the city of Mogadishu. So after this mission, you see the game ending credits. But then one more mission opens up, which happens 3 years after the Mogadishu Mile, and the mission comprises in taking down the militia leader Aidid. So, what do you think of the game? I didn't think this would happen, but even with the dated graphics, the game still pulled me in, and most of the times I came back to play it, I did it happily. So 9 out of 10. What do you think? Did you ever get to play this one? Comment with your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.